The United Nations General Assembly holds an emergency special session on Russia's military operation in Ukraine. The 33rd inter-sessional meeting of the Caribbean community kicked off in San Pedro, Belize. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov delivered his statements at the United Nations Disarmament Conference on the crisis in Ukraine, where he stated the importance of the complete eradication of nuclear weapons. Hi, this is From the South. I'm your news anchor, Dio Martin, from the Telstar Studios in Havana. We begin with the news. The United Nations General Assembly began an emergency session concerning Russia's military operation in Ukraine. The special session is set to continue on Tuesday with more heads of state to speak before the international body. The measure convening the General Assembly session was adopted by a vote of 11 in favor, with Russia against, and China, India, and the United Arab Emirates abstained. The meeting gave all members of the global body the opportunity to express their views on the military operation in Ukraine. Russia voted against the resolution, but under United Nations regulations, it did not have the veto power to derail the referral of the war to the General Assembly. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu vowed to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine and protect Russia from a military threat created by Western countries.
These are conducting a special military operation to protect the population of Donbass, to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. The main thing for us is to protect the Russian Federation from the military threat created by Western countries that are trying to use the Ukrainian people in the fight against our country.
The European Union authorized an information blackout not only of Russian media in Europe, but also of large corporations and companies. This very Tuesday, access to the accounts of the Sputnik Russian media was restricted in Spain and several European countries. The notice warns that due to the government's decision or some other institution, access to the account has been blocked formally in 28 European countries. Meta's Vice President of Global Affairs and Communications, Nick Clegg, announced that the company that owns Facebook and Instagram will continue to coordinate with all relevant governments, stating that they have received requests from several European Union governments to take action regarding Russian state-controlled media. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke for the first time about the meeting between his countries and Russia's delegations in Belarus and said he had received some signals from Moscow during the negotiations. Although he said he did not get the result they would have liked, they received positive signals from the Russian delegation. He explained that they will analyze them when his delegation returns to Kyiv, when they will decide how to move on to the second round. In the midst of the talks, the Ukrainian president said that hostilities against his country would not cease. The presidential advisor to the Ukrainian office, Mikhail Podolyak, said that the delegations did not announce a specific date for the meeting to be held soon on the Polish-Belarusian border, as they left with issues for consultation with their respective governments. Ukraine has acknowledged that 3 NATO countries are supplying it with 70 fighter jets that could be based in Poland, but Bulgaria, which has been included in Kyiv's official statement, refutes the claim, saying that its country did not sign up to any commitments. The countries which, according to Kyiv, would supply the 70 planes to Ukraine are Bulgaria, Poland, and Slovakia, claiming that in particular Bulgaria will deliver to Kyiv 14 Su-25 attack planes together with 16 MiG-29 fighters, while Poland and Slovakia will supply 28 and 12 MiG-29s respectively. However, after the news was published on an official Ukrainian government website, Bulgarian Prime Minister Kirill Petkov claimed that his country had never committed itself to supplying the military equipment. This is the second time that a European government has denied a claim made by the Ukrainian president or a member of his executive regarding the issue. We have news on Eastern Europe. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization activated for the first time in a defensive scheme its response forces. The High Command of the military alliance argued Russia's military operation in Ukraine prompted this decision. 30 high officers of the organization signed on the agreement after an emergency meeting of the body's military committee, during which the army chiefs assessed the situation in Ukraine. NATO adapted its quick response forces that gathered tens of thousands of soldiers in the eastern region of the bloc, keen on mobilizing them in light of the Russian military operation in Ukraine in a counteraction to what the alliance referred to on its website as, quote-unquote, a non-provoked and unjustified invasion on Russia's behalf. in efforts to dissuade Moscow. On February 24th, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced the beginning of the military operation in defense of the Donbass region, reassuring Russian armed forces targeted Ukrainian military infrastructure and not the civilian population, neither the troops who laid down arms. The government of Spain ruled out the possibility of sending arms to Ukraine. Instead, they have offered protection and regularization of Ukrainian citizens. President Pedro Sánchez stated in his declarations that Ukrainians will have the support of health and security protection material as well as the regularization of those residing in Spain so that they can have access to legal employment and social policies. In Switzerland, more than 140 employees of the operator of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline were all laid off by the same company in the city of Zug after Germany stopped the certification process of the company. The news was announced by Guy Parmelin, Minister of the Economy, in an interview with local media where he confirmed that over 140 people had been completely liquidated when the certification for the gas pipeline was halted by Germany last week, a guarantee that would allow the company to start up. It will be recalled that Germany responded in this way to Moscow's decision to recognize the independence of the self-proclaimed Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics. The operator Nord Stream 2 and its corporate members also received sanctions imposed by the United States. Turkey closed all warships entering the Black Sea. The government of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan was warned that all warships will be banned from crossing the Dardanelles and Bosphorus Straits amid the Russian military operation in Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Saturday asked his Turkish counterpart not to allow Russian military aircraft to pass through the straits connecting the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, but Ankara denied the request. Instead, Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu said that under the 1936 Montreal Convention, only ships with bases in the Black Sea will be allowed to cross the straits. The African Union condemned incidents of racial discrimination against Africans trying to flee the conflict in Ukraine. Senegalese President Macky Sall, the chairman of the African Union, and the African Union Commission chairperson Moussa Faki Mahamat said they were particularly disturbed with reports that some African residents in Ukraine have been turned away at borders. In this regard, the chairpersons urged all countries to respect international law and showed the same empathy and support to all people fleeing war, notwithstanding their racial identity. Since Russia launched a military operation in Ukraine last week, many foreigners residing in the European nation, including Africans, have been trying to leave the country to escape the violence. And the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, had this to say concerning the Ukrainian situation.
The conflict between great imperial powers needed to have come to an end and must not be allowed to be resurrected at all, because the Caribbean Sea must remain a zone of peace for Caribbean people. And whether it is imperialists from the west, imperialists from the east, imperialists from the north, imperialists from the south, the Caribbean Sea must remain a zone of peace for Caribbean people.
We're going to take a short break now. Please join us again after this. The 33rd inter-sessional meeting of the Caribbean community kicked off this Tuesday in San Pedro Belize. Caribbean heads of state will be discussing economic recovery and other important regional issues. Heads of government and state from the Caribbean community are convening today and tomorrow in Belize. Issues on the agenda include the impact of the current COVID-19 pandemic and recommendations to expedite recovery of regional economies, advancing the CARICOM single market and economy to help build a more resilient community, and also advancing CARICOM's Agri-Food Systems Agency for regional food and nutrition security. Workers at Haiti's State University Hospital have been on strike for a week, presenting their demand for a 60,000 gourds per day raise, equivalent to about $585 and better working conditions. To date, employees and authorities have still not been able to reach an agreement, which has caused the strike to extend for a week now. while the wards of the institution have also remained empty with very few professionals present. The president of the union of the institution, Evelyn Fremont, denounced the worn-down state in which the hospital currently finds itself after the lack of adequate materials or equipment for its proper functioning. Fremont also highlighted the lack of security in the area, which is evident after one of the professionals identified as Martial Pierre and a nursing student, Fabiola Payen, were kidnapped. The Cuban justice system continued the investigations and trials for the violent actions and vandalism that took place last year on July 11th. In the province of Holguín, in the northwest of the island, a court held an oral trial against those responsible for the violence. The defendants had access to the guarantees offered by the judicial system and Cuban law, including early access to a defense attorney. Experts proved the involvement of each of the defendants throughout the use of specialized and comparative techniques that made it possible to locate those involved. Meanwhile, defense attorneys explained they had the support of the judicial system as well as access to the detainee at all times. Lawyers also had access to the evidence gathered during the investigation to establish their defense strategy in court. Cuba presented evidence that the protests were the result of a plan designed by the United States government to provoke chaos and destabilization at a time when the country was facing a complex health situation due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Both the prosecutor's office and the court, as well as ourselves, meaning all the lawyers involved in the provisional proceedings, ensure that the essential guarantees of criminal proceedings were complied with, obviously on the basis of the general principles of law.
The promise made by President of Honduras, Xiomara Castro, during her campaign, which declares the entire Honduran territory free of open-pit mining, was formalized a few hours ago and released from the Secretary of Energy and Natural Resources, Environment and Mines. During her inauguration as the first woman president of the Central American nation, Xiomara Castro recommitted that no more permits for open mines or exploitation of mineral resources would be granted since they are considered harmful against the state, against natural resources and public health, and generate serious risk for the access to water as a human right. The document also explains that because of the approval of the mining moratorium provision for metallic and non-metallic exploration and exploitation, the review, suspension, and cancellation of environmental licenses, permits, and concessions will proceed.
We will work together with the armed forces to protect the environment. No more permits for open mines or exploitation of our minerals. No more concessions in the exploitation of our rivers, watersheds, national parks, and rainforests.
The president of Peru, Pedro Castillo, announced he has accepted the resignation of Transportation Communications Minister Juan Silva. The Minister of Transport and Communications, Juan Silva Villegas, ruled out resigning after the declarations of Carmen Lopez, who involved him and the country's head of state in an alleged criminal network dedicated to directing public works. Said resignation occurred in the middle of the debate of the motion for censure against Juan Silva carried out in the Congress of the Republic after revealing in recent days cases that would compromise him in the public tender. President Castillo accepted the resignation and thanked him for his services to the country. In Argentina, the political force Libres del Sur and the social movement Barrios de Pie petitioned a writ of amparo to the federal justice over the national government's decision to pay the debt acquired during former President Mauricio Macri's administration with the International Monetary Fund. Let's delve deeper into details with this report. The writ of amparo is a legal remedy for any person who feels their rights as citizens have been violated and is a form of constitutional protection lawsuit.
The president of the social movement Barrios de Pie, Humberto Tumini, and the coordinator of Libres del Sur, Silvia Saravia, filed for judiciary action against the national executive and legislative powers. We believe we are up against an imminent situation that will condition our future. That's why, from March 3rd to 6th, we will carry out a popular consultation so the people of Argentina can express their thoughts on the deal. We believe that all across the country, thousands of urns will accept our position and that we will get to 1 million people, all those residents who can engage and give their opinion. This is a key moment. Poverty, homelessness, and non-registered jobs are high. This makes the economic crisis a deeper ditch to get out of, since the pandemic made it worse, and we can only get out of all this with a sovereign model. This is why the Civil Society Coalition requests a court to declare the agreement signed by the Macri administration and the International Monetary Fund as unconstitutional. In this popular consultation, we will bring to the legislators, to the executive power, the voice of the people, the voice from below, the voice of those of us who today are going to make ourselves heard because we want a better future. After all, we trust that it is possible. But if we have the monetary fund here every 3 months telling us what to do, proposing more adjustment, and saying the main objective is to close the public accounts, our situation will deteriorate. We believe it is fundamental to sustain popular sovereignty so the future can be different. The activists also presented an injunction not to innovate against the legislative and executive power before the Argentinian justice.
It's so the two state powers don't legitimate what we consider is a true scam against the interests of the nation until the issue is resolved to its full extent. And the issue is if the whole agreement signed back in 2018 was lawful and constitutional, and if it stands its own ground. We consider it illegal and arbitrary because it was carried out in violation of many dispositions of the Argentinian Constitution, which states clearly that signing for a bond or a loan and deciding the nation's external and internal payment plan are faculties of the National Congress that cannot be drafted by the executive power insofar it vulnerates the actual legal and constitutional standards.
Meanwhile, the ruling coalition remains in talks with the opposition, trying to reach a consensus in order to have the agreement assessed and ratified by the parliament as soon as possible, which would avoid the default ruling on the matter. Argentina will no longer be able to pay the March deadline agreed upon by the credit institution with the then administration of former President Macri.
Carolina Silvestre, Telesur, Buenos Aires.
We have more news coming up after a final short break. Please stay with us. Hi, welcome back to From the South. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov delivered his statements at the United Nations Disarmament Conference on the crisis in Ukraine, where he stated the importance of the complete eradication of nuclear weapons.
We can say that regarding nuclear weapons agreements, first of all, we have to see them in practical way here. In this mission, we can say that nuclear weapons have been around for a long time. It is necessary to take all these weapons to the United States, so they are completely forgotten. We always come out of these, and we have to say that nuclear weapons can no longer exist and must be destroyed.
Likewise, Foreign Minister Lavrov emphasized that Russia fully supports the initiatives discussed at the convention. The high government official reiterated the need to eliminate all nuclear weapons.
In addition, we support all the Russian initiatives, the institutional initiatives within the convention, and we are confident about all the things we are organizing to eliminate nuclear weapons. With this, we say that Washington and its allies need a new world order concept. All of this is feasible to overcome these moments.
During his speech in the United Nations, a Russian foreign minister said the United States and its allies continue to impose aggressively their so-called world order.
And his allies continue to aggressively impose a so-called rules-based world order on the rest of the world's communication partners.
China's government rejected the transit of a U.S. warship through the Taiwan Strait and denounced Washington's support for separatist forces on the island. China's Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin called on the U.S. authorities to handle issues related to the island with caution and asked them to end their contacts with Taiwan and respect China's sovereignty. The official reminded the White House that its provocative actions could disrupt peace and stability on the island, as well as undermine relations between Beijing and Washington.
The Chinese people are firmly determined and resolved to defend national sovereignty and territorial integrity. The attempt by the U.S. to show support to Taiwan will be in vain. No matter who the U.S. sends, China urges the U.S. to abide by the One China principle and stipulations in the 3 China-U.S. joint communiques, stop all forms of official interaction with Taiwan, and handle Taiwan-related issues in a prudent manner, lest it should further undermine the larger interests of China-U.S. relations and peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait.
At least 20 civilians died in an attack in the northeastern region of the Democratic Republic of Congo. According to the president of a local activist organization, the attack occurred in the village of Kikura. The assailants struck wielding machetes and burning houses. The activists and local residents blamed the bloodshed on the Allied Democratic Forces armed group. The attack came months after the Democratic Republic of Congo and Ugandan troops launched a joint operation against the ADF, which has killed thousands of civilians in the region since 2013. Since the operation began in late November, the group has continued to attack and kill civilians. In December, at least 16 people resulted dead in an attack suspected to have been carried out by the group in the rural community of Manchina. In Brazil, the death toll rose to 231 following the tragedy of February 15th landslides and floods in the city of Petropolis in Rio de Janeiro. Authorities reported that most of the victims are women, while 44 minors died as a result of the rains. Officials also detailed that 876 people are still sheltered in municipal schools in the region. Petropolis declared a state of public calamity after an estimated 260 millimeters of rain fell on February 15th in a period of just 6 hours, more than the amount projected for the whole month of February. At least 10 people died from the flash flooding that battered northeastern Australia in the past few days, with the wild weather forcing residents to evacuate and schools to close, while thousands of homes have been left flooded. Queensland has been hit by the hardest, with torrential rain striking down in cities since the last Tuesday and slowly moving south to engulf the state's capital, Brisbane. Photographs and videos show the Brisbane River extremely swollen and many streets severely flooded, with extensive damage to roads, buildings and vehicles caught in the downpour. Usually busy highways were submerged as well. The authorities estimated that up to 18,000 homes across the state have been affected, with about 15,000 of those in Brisbane. More than 1,000 people have been evacuated and about 53,000 homes are left without power. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said the report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was an atlas of human suffering and a damning indictment of failed climate leadership.
Today's report underscores two core truths. First, coal and other fossil fuels are choking humanity. All G20 governments have agreed to stop funding coal abroad. They must now urgently do the same at home and dismantle their coal fleets. Those in the private sector still financing coal must be held to account. Oil and gas giants and their underwriters are also on notice. You cannot claim to be green while your plans and projects undermine the 2050 net zero target and ignore the major emission cuts that must occur this decade.
We've come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at Tulsa English. You can also join us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For Tulsa English, I'm Dio Martin. Thanks for watching.